I don't get like too overly teacher or preachy with anybody, but I guess the one form of advice that I really put out to younger artists is that your self-confidence is everything, and you have to hold it as such. You have to hold it with such preciousness, and that confidence that we all have, that purity that we all have of, we don't start any of these endeavors trying to be the greatest artist ever or trying to be successful. We do it because we simply just enjoy doing it, and it makes us happy.
Hey everyone, this is your host Yoshino. You're listening to Artist Decoded. My guest today is a very good friend of mine. His name is Joseph Lee. He is an actor, a painter, and an artist. And I'm just proud to call Joseph my friend. It's been really interesting developing a relationship with him over the years. I think I first heard about his work actually around 2018 when I watched his film Searching, which premiered at Sundance. And then he started coming around to the gallery when we had a gallery for No Wave in downtown LA. He would come to some of our shows, and then I think I had him on the podcast the first time in 2018 as well. And then we put on a gallery show for Joey in 2019. And, Joey and I will always reminisce about that show because him and I developed some sort of brotherly experience of a kindred spirit of a sort. And, I remember specifically we sat down and we had a really intimate, vulnerable conversation about our lives and, about our childhood. And, him and I are both only children, so we were able to relate on that. But there was definitely this bond, I think, that we forged at that moment that I don't think could ever be broken, It was one of those moments where you recognize that, this person is going to be in your life for the rest of your life. And it's a beautiful experience, and you can't really force anything like that to really happen. It just kind of occurs, right? Like these people along the way that you meet, maybe you could develop a relationship with them, close relationship with them at the time, but some relationships you'll just carry throughout the rest of your life, and Joey's one of them for me. So we went really deep into this podcast. We talked a lot about mental health, which is a subject that I'm very fond of, something that I research quite a bit. And we talk about examining the origin of pain and trauma. We also go in deep into how Joey got into pursuing acting and then how he became a painter through the process of moving to LA and discovering painting. We also talk about his currently unreleased project, which is a Netflix show entitled Beef, which stars David Choe, Yeun, and Wong, to name a couple of the other actors in that series. But this particular podcast is about his upcoming solo exhibit entitled Passive Aggressive, which is going to be opening on September 8th at GR Gallery in the Lower East Side of Manhattan in New York City. So you should definitely go and stop by, say hi to Joey, and check it out. Yeah, you can see his work in person. So, yeah. Before we begin this episode, please go to our iTunes and Spotify page. Leave us a quick review there. Anything helps to get the word out about the podcast. Also, if you'd like to donate to us, please keep in mind that Artist Decoded is an independently funded and resourced podcast. If you go to our website, artistdecoded.com, you can find a donate link, which will take you to our Patreon and PayPal page. All right, so here it is, my conversation. Without further ado, thank you for tuning in. my conversation with my really good friend, Joseph Lee. I hope you enjoy it. Your show at GR Gallery is coming up, and I was going to read the statement back to you to start off the pod. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Cool. All right. GR Gallery is pleased to present Passive Aggression, a solo exhibition of new paintings by self-taught artist Joseph Lee. Passive Aggression documents Lee's time during 2020 and 2022. As his daily distractions dissipated under lockdown, he was forced to examine gaps, namely his liminality and inability to verbally communicate emotions, which made him unrecognizable to himself and others around him. Lee is both Korean and American, husband and son, actor and painter, passive and aggressive. Lee's subject matters grapple with the way his liminality and thus lack of solid identity began to impact the world he inhabited. The artist's first instinct under duress was to isolate and paint. During these years, the process of creating the works showcased in Passive Aggression was a solve. To finish a painting was not the intent. These works capture moments in Lee's life where he deflected to his studio in fear of uncertainty. At the time of inception, these paintings were the best representations of what words escaped him, to convey in composition what he was unable to articulate. They are a line of expression uninterrupted. Passive Aggression is a collection of the artist's self-reflections, love letters, and apologies translated onto canvas. So what I want to ask is, what sort of things would you say that you were distracted by pre-pandemic?
I think everything. With and without work, I was distracted by just the daily activities that you do, like going grocery shopping, going to work out. But then I was also distracting myself with the work. And it would be this immediate reaction to all sorts of things, to good news, to bad news, to arguing with my wife or girlfriend at the time. And I would just find myself at a certain point beginning to use the painting as a crutch or some sort of cover to actually addressing what I was going through in present time. And yeah.
Do you think that you always have done that to some greater or lesser extent?
I think so. Yeah. I think I've just always been somebody that struggled to really stay present with myself, and I've always looked ahead, and even growing up. When I was in high school, all I could think of was college. When I was in college, all I could think of was getting out. And I've always just kind of been a dreamer in that sense. But yeah, there are flaws to being so cemented in that state of mind. And I for the longest time, I thought painting was the state of being present with myself, and it is to a certain degree. Yeah, like I said previously, it's at its extremist point, I see it becoming a crutch of a lot of my emotions. And so, during the pandemic, when all those activities and distractions were stripped away, I was really just kind of forced to just sit there and deal with these emotions. And not only deal from like a personal standpoint, but learning that my creative work needed to be in balance and also parallel with that mental health. And it couldn't be off balance in that way. And I got into therapy during the pandemic. It was one of the greatest decisions I ever made, and I've been in it about 2 years now, and I could confidently say that I've not only grown from a mental health standpoint, but I feel like I've grown as an artist as well, and I feel like all of those forces just kind of have to be aligned.
Yeah. Would you say that you're an advocate for people going to therapy?
Um, I don't know. It's I feel uncomfortable being an advocate for anything, especially when it comes to personal health. I can only speak from my experience, in that
True.
it's been phenomenal for me.
Hmm.
And you know, I think like many people, I would assume I always had this very kind of ignorant notion of talking to a complete stranger about my traumas. And at a certain point, I felt like I was at a breaking point and I needed to go see someone, even if I didn't necessarily believe in the process.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I just needed to get to that point where I could be humble enough to recognize that I can't do this on my own anymore, and that I do need to talk to somebody. And and really, it's the actual process. If I could be specific about it,
Hmm.
it's the process of just, for me, verbalizing certain traumas, and not only traumas, just ideas and concepts that are always recycling in my own mind. And it stays in a certain state, and it stays with a certain narrative when it's been just stewing in my brain for so long. But
Hmm.
the minute I'm able to just verbalize those things to anybody, it's almost kind of like it loses a little bit of its weight. And
Yeah.
those are little things that I really learned along the way. And if I could just learn how to uh, communicate in a healthy way, and to just verbalize those things, and to just lessen the weight off my back in a lot of those subjects, I've just felt like, oh, it's not always as one sided or so strict in my view as I thought it was, based upon a certain narrative. And I feel like that's just loosened me up in many ways.
Totally. Yeah, I could see that. I was listening to this podcast one time about secrets. It was on this podcast called Hidden Brain, and it was talking about how it was dissecting the idea of secrets, I suppose, and it was talking about. I remember specifically there was one story about this lady, and she was talking about the secret that she held on for like so long, and how by holding on to that secret, she was the only one really suffering from that secret, and I think to extrapolate this upon what you're talking about, by kind of like holding in this tension, there's no release, right? And to be able to relay uh, the thing that is bothering you to someone in a setting where the person is just there to listen and help guide you along the way. I think that is actually like super helpful. And I think, by being, at least this is from what I've observed within myself, but by being like completely just like brutally honest
Mm.
with yourself, even if it doesn't feel great, I think like that's kind of part of um, another distraction in this life is like being geared towards pleasure, being geared towards feeling good all the time.
Mm.
But sometimes, you kind of have to like break down the muscle to be able to rebuild new muscle, in a
Sure.
metaphorical sense, or, break down the trauma, break down these ideas that you've had about yourself and really like dissect them and try to get to the source of where that pain and trauma comes from.
Yeah, I because if you don't, the alternative is to just constantly live in this kind of performance. And for me, it's I think my entire 20s was, um, it was redefining whatever traumas I had dealt with in my childhood, and,
Yeah.
and at times going to the extreme of just either recreating my own identity, and that helped with me moving to LA. And
When did you move to LA?
I moved. It's been about 10 years now.
Oh
So
wow, 10 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, coming to a brand new place, and LA to me was, I mean, it was like Disneyland. I mean, it wasn't really like a real place. It was just, it was a place that you see in movies. So
Mm.
I remember
La La Land.
absolutely, yeah. And I came here with just pure optimism, just green in the eyes. Um,
Hmm.
with that, it was almost kind of like, oh, I can come into this new environment with a clean slate. Whatever baggage, um, whatever traumas, whatever things that I had dealt with in my past that were weighing me down, I can offload it there and come to this brand new place and really just kind of restart.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
um, I'm sorry, I went on a tangent. What was the actual question? What was the original question?
Uh, I think I wasn't really. I don't think I was really asking a question. I was just making a statement on just mental health in general. I believe that's where we were.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I was talking about the performance. I was talking about how, like,
Yes.
um, so when I came to LA, I had this opportunity to just become a new person, rewrite all those things that I was ashamed of myself and I just didn't like myself for. And in doing that, you you begin to kind of lose. There's a certain amount of disconnect to those traumas because now you're putting them into a corner. You're locking it away. Uh,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
after doing that for 10 years, uh, I think it's now kind of gotten to a point in my 30s where I've gotten to this place just of growth, just natural growth. And now that, I'm not only am I just, a single kid running around, I have a responsibility as a husband. All these things kind of come into play. That exhaustion that I felt that I didn't realize because I was so distracted in my 20s, those things are now really kind of coming to the forefront. And I feel it, I see it manifesting in just very exhaustive ways in my daily life.
Yeah. What do you think drew you to acting initially? Like, what do you think drew you to wanting to get into acting?
I think it must have just been being an only child. Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I know you're an only child as well, so I'm sure we can relate to this. But
Yeah.
I was a bit of a latchkey kid growing up. My parents were always away, busy working, and so I was just left to my own devices. And a lot of that what consisted of me just growing up in front of a television, and
Hmm.
even from that early age, I just remember I could just feel my creativity, not creativity, my imagination just going wonders. I mean, it was, I would watch everything from the Godfather trilogies to
Hmm.
Ace Ventura. And I really just get lost in just all of these imaginary circumstances. And
Yeah.
it really it allowed me to even at that early age just to be humble in the sense of like, man, there's just so much more out there than in this small scope that I exist in. And I want to find those things. I want to learn about those things. And so I feel like whether it's painting or acting, I feel like all of that, those kind of creative urges
Mhm.
really originated from me just sitting there in front of a television growing up.
Hmm. Did you get into a lot of creative outlets when you were growing up, like as a kid or in high school and in college?
No, not really. I mean, I grew up in Indiana, and there wasn't. I mean, in terms of like fine art, these things weren't very accessible. Um,
Hmm.
no, I think I had a very like typical childhood in terms of activities. I mean, um, I would build forts. I would collect
Hmm.
rocks. I guess there's like a creative nature in those things. And then yeah, I would play sports and all those kind of things. But I guess one of my earliest memories of doing something creative for myself was I I would I would play with these action figures, and I remember like I was a huge fan of WWF, and
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
and the toys were kind of expensive, and so my mom she couldn't afford the actual WWF toys, so instead she would buy me they were like these cheap kind of they're not even GI Joe, they're like the bootleg GI Joe.
Hmm.
I would instead use those, and I would take a Sharpie and I would, draw out like the boots on these people. And
Hmm.
I remember my mom, she gave me this idea where, uh, because they're not WWF figures, they don't come with the accessories like the championship belts. And so she would take a penny and then put two pieces of scotch tape over the penny, and then she would sharpie black the two ends of the scotch tape, and that would be my little championship belt that I would work with. And so
Hmm.
I would play with these toys all day in my closet, and in that closet, I was creating narratives. I was creating storylines, much like what I was seeing on television. And I would create these the monologue speeches for these wrestlers, the everything down to like their entrance into the ring, and it was truly like a beautiful time. It nurtured a lot for me because I felt truly safe and limitless in terms of just creating whatever I wanted to create in that closet.
Hmm. Was there some sort of like safety with that closet? Or, I mean, it's a very kind of visual thing. Speaking, I mean, just when you said, because I was just thinking, okay, you're playing with, these action figures, and then, you said closet, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, like why were you playing in the closet exactly?
I don't think there was any specific reason. Maybe I just liked the dim light. It just matched the
Yeah.
matched the ambiance.
Match the ambiance that you're trying to create.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, but growing up in Indiana, we lived in this. We grew up in this apartment complex, and
Hmm.
it wasn't until much later in my childhood that I started really making friends in that complex. So prior to that, it was just me, just kind of spending time by myself and just keeping myself busy.
Hmm. And then when you came to LA, did you, and I'm sure we covered this in the last podcast, but you came to LA for acting, is that right? And then painting came later?
Yeah, yeah.
So then run me through that process. Like you came here for acting, and you're green and optimistic and starry eyed.
hmm
And I'm just curious how that evolved into you wanting to get into painting.
I studied theater back at school.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I remember that. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I caught that bug, and I just decided a long time before I graduated college that this was something I wanted to pursue. And in doing that, I guess in a way, like the desperation of school kind of dissipated. I just kind of I picked all the classes that I wanted to take that I was interested in. I did all the plays that I wanted to do, and I just really told myself, well, look, this literally, my diploma is going to be a piece of paper. There's no promised job that I'm going to get offered after this. So I'm just going to enjoy my time here, learn as much as I can, and then go pursue it. And so I came to LA, and it was a whirlwind. I think like that first week, I had gotten myself a commercial agent. I think I booked a commercial that second week. So,
Wow.
so pretty much I'm out here by week 2 thinking like, oh, this is going really well. It's easy. This is,
Yeah.
uh,
And then how did things pan? I mean, yeah, how did things pan out the next couple of years?
very quickly, a couple months after that, I found myself waiting tables at a restaurant. So
Oh,
the
nice.
star had
Yeah.
diminished a little bit. It had dimmed a little bit, but I was doing that, and while I was waiting tables, I'd be chugging cups of coffee just to get through my shift, especially like the late night shifts or the
Oh, wow.
shifts. And so by the time I get home from my shift, I'm just so amped up on coffee. I can't sleep. And so I would just paint. I would doodle. I would paint, just to be able to sleep. And during that time, I think Instagram had been around for a couple of years, and so I would just paint and post something, and slowly I started to get really good feedback on some of these paintings, and and surely enough, I was able to sell a couple of paintings on the side. And from there on, I just kind of had to make another decision to be like, okay, well, I think this is what I want to do full time. So I went in, put my 2 weeks at the restaurant, and it was the longest walk back to my car, thinking like, well, this must be a mistake. I am, but I think I just, for me, generally, I always kind of need to push myself against the wall, and certain decisions just need to be matter of fact for me to just go in, and
Yeah.
fortunately things worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about that a lot. Like these decisions that we make, they're so potent, and like, I think at the end of the day, we really know internally what's right for us or not. And then sometimes, if not a lot of the time, I feel like a lot of people don't listen to that higher calling or that higher purpose. And I'm just curious, like, did it feel like some sort of spiritual connection or something with you gravitating towards wanting to be a painter? Or, I mean, like when you look back at it now, like how would you describe those moments?
I saw it just for money. Well, I remember
Yeah.
I sold my first painting
Yeah.
for $500.
For what?
For $500.
Uh-huh.
And then
Nice.
the next painting I sold, it covered for like two months of rent at that time. And
Damn, man, was that back in the 50s? Just kidding.
it was the most money, the most cash I've ever seen. And so,
Wow.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's
really
wild.
it wasn't even spiritual. There was no, there was no grandiose position that I felt in. It was just, oh wow, like this is going to cover my rent.
Yeah.
And I'm doing something that I can do at home, and it's not work to me. So,
Yeah.
and it's something that I know I could do. I guess there is some sort of innate confidence that I did have for myself to be able to just do it. But yeah, it was really just to get by, just to pay rent and have a couple of meals.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I got into photography kind of for similar reasons, which is kind of funny that it led to this sort of like artistic pursuit, So I think like sometimes also just maybe at the time you're not as conscious, but those initial decisions can also lead you to further amounts of consciousness depending on how hungry you are for that, I don't know, that deeper inner journey, I suppose. At least that's the way that I look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess when you can meet all those kind of like the Maslow's needs, then at a certain point it frees up your mind to be able to get to a certain consciousness. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was able to kind of feel that spiritual connection earlier in my life with acting, because at that time, I wasn't financially desperate, and I wasn't on my own scraping by. And I do remember with acting, there was a connection in that. Like I had said earlier, I wanted to. I've always just had this very insatiable curiosity with people, and maybe subconsciously at that time, like it was kind of a bit of self hate in myself, that I wanted to place myself in other shoes, and I wanted to be somebody else other than myself, because I just found other people more interesting growing up. And so I think there was some sort of spiritual connection where, this being on stage and allowing myself to get into this writing or this character's dialogue monologue, it's truly an outer body experience. I'm literally diving into something that is not, that it goes beyond me as an individual. And so I do feel like with acting early on, I did feel that, and then life happened after that on my own.
Like, what's your point of view on acting now? I mean, like, you have a project that's going to be coming out, I believe, next year. Is that right?
Yeah. I got there are two projects coming out. I'm not. I don't believe I'm able to divulge too much on it, but the project that you're speaking of, it's called Beef, and we're all super excited about it. The cast and crew.
Yeah. What sorts of? I mean, yeah, I'm curious. Like, what can you talk about the project? Like, can you talk about what it's about?
Yeah. So it starts from this road rage incident between two characters, and all of the chaos that ensues, respective to these two characters' lives, all originating from this single incident. And so there's, in terms of the writing, the premise, the character dynamics, there's a lot of it is just groundbreaking. It's the actors involved, Stephen Yeun, David Choe, Young Mazino, Ali Wong. I mean, it's just a phenomenal cast. Our showrunner Sonny, who's worked on previous projects, Dave and Silicon Valley. It's just a lot of brilliant minds coming, and it felt like going away to like summer camp for like a couple of months and just like hanging out with friends.
That's cool.
I know it's a very cliche thing to say, where it's like, you just gotta have fun. It's just gotta be about fun, and that couldn't be more true for this project. Yes, absolutely. It's hard work at times, but I think the tone was set by production, by the showrunner, that this was going to be something new and fresh for everybody involved. And we should just enjoy ourselves along the ride. And so I think ultimately it's going to be a great project when it's finished.
Can I ask what's new and fresh and groundbreaking about it?
Yeah, I think with the character dynamics, I think we're presenting people of our community, Asian Americans, in a very matter-of-fact way. I think there's a tendency to, not that this is a bad thing, but there's a tendency to show people of our community in a polished way at times. And
I see.
This just happens to be what it is. And the audience could either digest it or spit it out, but we are just presenting ourselves as who we are. And that's not always a very good thing. But
that sounds interesting.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of authenticity, and I think what we're showing is just regular people that come with all of the regular baggage. And I've rarely seen that on television with an Asian American face, and so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah. And I remember like we were talking on the phone, you were talking about just the craft of acting in general. And you're saying something like about the truth in acting is that you're really placing your fullest attention on whoever you're speaking to.
Mm.
And I'm curious, like, if you can extrapolate that on that idea a bit.
Yeah, there are different schools of thought in terms of the technical aspects of acting. I was primarily trained in the Meisner technique, which is essentially it's just you are responding to your partner, and there's a certain dance to that where you are open ears and you are completely open to accepting whatever comes your way from the person in front of you, conscious or subconscious. And so there's a sense of looseness that comes in that way because you are out of your own head and you are fully placing your attention on the other person. And so I think there's kind of a misconception with acting at times where it just feels like it's all on me and I have to just feel everything and I just have to it has to all come from me and it just exudes out into this thing. And for myself personally, I feel like acting is always a dance between the partners, and it's always just listening. It's always just opening yourself up and surprising yourself on how you do respond. And that happens all the time in a scene where I'll feel something that I think to myself, oh wait, it's interesting that I felt that way. It's interesting that I reacted that way in present form. And so it feels fresh, it feels new, and I think ultimately the best performances come out that way.
And in what ways do you think that, do you generally find that you get casted for roles that you would play characters that are close to how you truly are, or sometimes do you find that it's like you have to kind of completely change your natural inclinations to fit the character?
Well, I haven't played like Abraham Lincoln like Daniel Day-Lewis yet, but I generally speaking,
I'd love to see that.
Yeah,
Korean Lincoln.
Yeah,
it could be. Hey, dude, it could be you. Korean Lincoln.
I'm waiting. They're not picking up my phone call.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to be fair, it was the 1800s, so.
First take.
Yeah.
I think it's like it's almost as if I think anytime you jump into a character, regardless of how different they may seem from you in your real life, you kind of have to just bite into these seeds of truth. For instance, I played I played somebody who is a very wealthy businessman. Obviously, from an external point of view, it's completely unrelatable to my life personally. But when you dive into the script and when you can really kind of treat it as a Bible to where, okay, everything comes from this script. And if you can really dissect those words, then I think that's when your imagination starts bubbling. And that's when you can start certain words and certain lines start popping off the script. And then you have to think, why is this popping off? Why is this resonating with me? And most of the time it resonates because you're finding a certain personal connection to it. And so I find that process, oftentimes I find that process happening. Recently with the character that I played, I am playing an artist, but there are a lot of things that I don't have in common with this character. But if I can bite into certain seeds of truth, then I can connect with certain things, and that kind of becomes my anchor. And then everything else, that's where my imagination kind of starts expanding. But at least it's coming from a very grounded place that I can touch, and everything else just becomes a free for all, and it's play.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious how like do you think that acting influences your painting and vice versa?
Absolutely. Yeah.
In what ways?
I think from, I think when I first started painting, um, I'm not formally trained. And so I think for me, it was just a matter of I just wanted to be very technically good. And
Hmm.
so I didn't really have much in terms of concepts and philosophies to really kind of pull from. And so the closest thing that I could pull from was the acting. And so, my training on stage or on set has me, studying reactions and studying a face and absorbing this character or this person in front of me. And so I think the idea of doing a portrait was very close to me, and it was something that I could easily draw upon. Um, and
Hmm.
and on the other end too, there's I think the the painting has actually helped my acting in terms of it's loosened my desperation with a lot of things. I think with
Hmm.
acting, it's a very chaotic industry where it's just a lot of ups and downs. There's no guarantees on anything, and so with painting, I probably for one finished painting that I probably have five or six that never see the light of day. Um, they just for whatever reason I just can't finish it, or I just lose interest in it. And if I could parallel that with acting, it's the same way of, oh man, like I'm for every 5, 10 auditions that I don't get, there's always one that's out there for me. And painting really allowed me to kind of recognize that. Like not everything has to hit, and not everything will hit, but it's doing the work on each one of those projects, each one of those paintings, and something will come about. And so it's the painting side has definitely kind of eased a lot of my anxieties and desperation on the other end.
Hmm. Yeah. And I would assume that, essentially because you can control the output, right? Like, or you feel like you're in control of the output. And I think we've talked about this before on other occasions. But, with a painting, it's like, it's all on you,
Mm.
right? Like no one's going to do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And, with acting, it's kind of like, you're putting yourself out there, you're doing these auditions and so on and so forth. And you're not really in control of, I mean, yes, you can decide if you choose a role or if you don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're not really in control of like, I want this specific role, so I'm going to take that specific role,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not so, or I would at least assume. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of what it's the painting has in many ways being that salve, and it's also been at times that crutch to the acting side. And like you said, because there's so much of it is outside of my control as an actor, I tend to bind myself to the art very tightly at times in my life, because that is the one thing that I can't control, and that is the one thing that I can call my own shots about all around.
Hmm.
Uh, and
Yeah.
and I guess in terms of just philosophically, I feel like the acting is something that's very it's a humble experience, because you when you walk onto a set, the first thing you recognize is that you are a small piece to this machine or this puzzle that needs to be put together, and
Yeah.
um, and you're constantly engaging with other people, and there's just a very grand sense of humility that comes from that. But at the same time, I also need my art side, which is just me being purely narcissistic and purely selfish with my own time. And those two things, for me to feel whole as a human being and as an artist, those things, both sides need to be balanced for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something to be said about having some sort of equilibrium between different facets of one's life,
Mm,
and that could be in different projects or, for this example, it's like, you have acting as a medium and you also have painting as a medium. but I think we're always balancing different sorts of identities throughout our life. I mean, even in your artist statement, you talk about, having to be a husband and son, actor, painter. And, I think I don't know. I guess I just think about that in terms of identity. We're like constantly juggling different types of identity, and also just like how that identity looks on the outside. Right. And,
Mm,
which at the end of the day, I guess isn't really even important. Right. It's really about what you think about yourself. But
sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, and that, I think the struggle is that what you do think about yourself comes from many voices internally. Like you were saying, it can come from so many different forces, and yeah, I think
yeah,
I think I for me personally, it's going back to that idea of liminality. And I'm not going to even pretend that's like a normal part of my vocab. I actually learned it from my wife, who did a paper on it back in college. And essentially, it's dealing with one's existence transitioning between two different stages of life. And
yeah,
specifically, it's dealing with, from that definition, a liminal person being somebody that can't be placed in one single category. And so for me, all those things that were listed in that artist statement, I find myself constantly jumping from one to the end, and trying not to trip along the way. And I think when at a certain point, when that becomes your norm, where you're constantly doing this juggling act, you begin to lose your own voice, and you begin to question, what do I believe? Because I feel like I'm constantly prioritizing these other voices, and I'm of service to these other voices before mine.
I see. Yeah. Like at some point, did you think like, oh, am I saying the right thing? Like the thing that I need to say, like prior to the pandemic?
All the time. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I guess it just became louder in the pandemic. Um, yeah,
And what do you mean? In what ways?
I just think generally speaking, I think all of my anxieties just became louder, just without the distractions in my life, and just being placed at home, and and that, and just everything was just happening. Social movements, the fall of democracy. I mean, just there was just so much
Fuck.
that was being placed in front of
Yeah.
you, and you're just trying to like compartmentalize all of these things that are happening, and and also just trying to be in tune with like your place in all of this that's happening. And so I through all of that, I think just all of my anxieties and all of those voices, and you and I, we talked about in the past that that idea of the shadow, um,
Yeah.
this alternate force, this alternate being of you, uh, that exists in the back of your brain, that is constantly talking to you, and it's
Hmm.
constantly it's either contradicting what you want to say, or it's actually saying what you really want to say. And so
Yeah.
I'm constantly in conflict with that shadow. And I think through this process with therapy, I think I'm getting to a place where I just have to learn how to make friends with my shadow, instead of always trying to put it aside, or trying to um, argue with this other voice of mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the shadow is a part of all of us. And I think it's really good to not create strict moral judgments against things that are we believe to be good or wrong, right?
Mm,
Uh, I think that there are certain things that I might believe in that, you know, someone else may not believe in. And I think both like states of mind can technically be right at the same time. Like that's kind of where the paradox comes into play,
Right.
where like the way that my version of reality and the things that I believe, how they exist in my mind can be different from the way that you think, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's like really trying to, like, if you want to say somewhat sane in this lifetime, you have to realize, at least this is what I tell myself, that, you know, I just kind of have to accept that other people have different opinions than I do. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean to not fight against things that are evil. But I think that there will always be differing opinions and different ways of being. But I think what I think is, well, what's the most optimal way for me to exist, knowing that there are other, like, people believe in completely different things, you know? And so then through that process, I kind of think of like the art of letting go and being accepting of just the different ways that people want to live, or, you know, because I think that there can be an anxiety there of just like holding on too tightly to anything. You know, it could be like for you, like maybe this control of painting, you know, and it helps you in certain ways. And I think that's a paradox. It's like it helps you in certain ways, but at other times that, you know, you can be holding on so tightly that you're, you know, holding on to the knife and your hand bleeds or something, you know? So.
Yeah, I guess it is a matter of kind of getting to that like stoic state of mind of just accepting things as they are, and you know, with everything that I'm analyzing, that we're analyzing in our daily lives, it's also just a matter of recognizing that nothing may ever lead to that absolute truth, and maybe whatever instability or tension that exists in your life, maybe that's just a fundamental part of life, and in a way, like that keeps the balance to a lot of things as well.
Yeah, totally. I think it's the suppression of that shadow that actually turns into something really negative. You know, to be able to like, I think that's where therapy is really good. You know, it's like someone that you can share certain things that you're going through, or, you know, maybe like an instance in your life that, you know, you had a negative situation with another person. You can talk to them, depending on who your therapist is, but, you know, like theoretically you can talk to them, just, you know, just like, you know, tell them without judgment, essentially, right? Theoretically speaking, right? Because you know, there's that, you know, humans are imperfect, so, you know, doesn't necessarily mean that they will be completely unjudgmental, is what I'm saying.
Well, you're perfect, Yoshino.
No, I'm definitely not. Definitely not perfect.
In all seriousness, I'm not even being biased as a friend, but you're somebody in my life. You're such a great example of somebody in my life that has always kind of a very balanced perspective on life, and it's the way you carry yourself. And I feel like you bring that same sense of wisdom and mental stability to all the different facets of your life. It doesn't matter what activity, it doesn't matter what interest. It's there's a very steady flow in the way you handle yourself through good times and up. And obviously, I can't be inside your mind to examine, but just from the outside, it's just you just have a very calming energy, and that's just why I love being around you.
Oh, thanks, man. I like being around you too. I wish we could be around each other more often.
I know.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that. I really do. Yeah, I really try to work hard on myself, man. Like, and yeah, I mean, I'm not always a calm person, you know, but I really try to work on my demons And I think that's, speaking of the shadow work, I think it's really important to be like just brutally honest with yourself about, you know, uh, what is making you upset
Hmm.
um, or whatever, or being able to have like some sort of release, like for me, it's like a physical release that really helps
Right.
to work out and all of that. Um,
Do you actively do anything creatively to kind of
mhm,
fight those demons?
for sure. Oh, lots of writing,
Yeah, yeah.
just being, and I oscillate between like physical writing and, typing.
Hmm.
And the difference I think is like, so in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, like you either train like gi or no gi.
Hmm.
And with gi, it slows down your movements because you have something to grab onto, right? And I can't write as fast as I can type. And also when you type something, uh, you can easily erase it, right? But with writing physically, it slows down your movement. So you think, at least for me, like I think in a way where it's like, okay, well, what exactly do I want to put down, Or even if I'm trying to write fast, trying to go like straight stream of consciousness without like thinking about grammatical errors or like,
Hmm.
anything like that, it's still slower than how I can type, right?
Hmm.
So I think like, I don't know, it's kind of like going back to the idea of these various mediums that you have to be able to express yourself, right? And I think um some people have multiple mediums of ways that they want to express themselves, and I think or it could just be one, someone could just be a painter and they get everything from that, right? But I mean, I don't know about you, but me personally, I've been my whole life I've done so many different types of things that it just kind of like all amalgamates into like, I think it's all holistic in some degree, one informs the other, kind of like this jujitsu metaphor with the writing,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, it's who's that Japanese samurai philosopher?
Musashi.
Yeah, yeah. His whole ideal was everything must be in constant balance for you to be completely optimal.
Hmm.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's so true. Um,
Yeah.
you kind of have to be able to intake and experience a bit of everything for you to fully experience life.
Yeah. What things do you do to balance yourself out?
Similar to you, I have to start off my day doing something physical, whether it's
Yeah.
going to the gym or just going on a walk. I think um, the biggest detriment to painting is my back and my spine, and so
Oh, because you're constantly sitting down.
or even standing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's just constant stress on my back. And so that's just something that I always have to start off doing something where I can loosen my body physically, release the tension. Um,
For
and,
sure.
and it's psychologically, I've been doing these gratitude prayers. Um,
Hmm. What's that like?
it's been great. It started while I was shooting beef.
Mm.
It's about an hour drive that I have to go to set every morning. And so I would get up with a cup of coffee and then I'd just get in my car and I would just have an hour to myself every day where I would just start off by thinking of the first five things that come to mind that I'm grateful for in this moment.
Mm. So let's see. The first one's Yoshino. The second one is
It's Yoshino all the way through.
Yoshino, 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 Yoshino.
It's not just one day.
I look at your phone and there's a photo of me. I'm like, what the hell? Just total bromance. No, I'm just kidding. Go on. Sorry, I derailed it.
No,
Derailed you.
no, actually, you actually, I believe in our last conversation, you had mentioned doing a gratitude journal. Uh,
Oh yeah, I did. I did do that for quite a while. Yeah, like specifically.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and actually, I took that to heart by starting these gratitude prayers, and it really like you said, it really just kind of starts off your brain just reframing just whatever you're carrying through baseline. If sometimes you can wake up just in a bad mood or from a bad nightmare or bad nights of sleep, and
Yeah.
just to start off from a place of gratitude, no matter how you're feeling, I feel like really kind of goes a long way to setting the tone for yourself for the rest of that day. And
Yeah.
it's just all those little things that I can do. Why not?
Yeah. And it's such a simple thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, just literally reminding yourself. And I think we all need reminders, whether it's through a book or through a podcast or whatever. Like you reminding me about the gratitude journal. Like I haven't specifically done a gratitude journal. I do journaling, but yeah, it just makes me think like, oh, you know what? I should really do that again, because that was something that really added a lot of value to my life, and I think that, yeah, something I've been thinking about a lot is just simplifying. Like I think we're such in a culture of just adding, like buying a certain thing or, like adding certain things into your life, which actually kind of makes things more complicated. And I feel creates a certain amount of anxiety and stress depending on what you add, So it's like, I think like being able to kind of just dwindle the needs down to something that's very simple, I think it actually makes things more rich. There could be more depth within a small amount of things as opposed to needing to put your attention in like hundreds of things. Do you know what I mean?
I feel like a computer with too many running tabs on my browser. And instead of closing them out, I'm always just adding more and more until like my whole computing system just shuts down.
Interesting.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's.
I'm curious to see your desktop now, because I don't. I mean, it kind of goes back to like this idea of like, being very observative of, different things. And I'm always curious about like people's desktop, and like if there's like hundreds of tabs out or like, you know what I mean?
I'll give you my tab list if you give me your Amazon order history. How about that? That seems like
my Amazon order history. All right.
They'll tell me everything I need to know about you.
Yeah, let's see. All right, my last Amazon order. Let's see. They're all just esoteric books. I only read esoteric books, damn it. Yes. And get shampoo.
Very important.
You need shampoo. I mean, come on. You gotta keep it clean. But yeah, that's really interesting. So like I was curious too, because I think on the phone the other day we were talking just about spirituality. I mean, we were talking about a lot of things, but somewhere along the conversation you were talking about how like the older that you get, the more spiritual that you get. Is that correct? If I'm remembering correctly? You're like, no.
I don't, unless I was lying to you, I don't believe saying that, but
maybe I just injected that.
I'm trying to meet you there though.
You're like, I'm just like putting words in your mouth.
I got to knock on my shadow. What do you have to say about this?
Yeah.
No, I do believe that as you get older, you start reverting back into your childlike state. I think that's pretty true. I think
is that true for you? You think?
I think so. I mean, we're still fairly young, but I guess going back to that shadow, my therapist had put it in such a great way where your shadow is essentially just like your 6-year-old self that's just crying for attention. And I guess maybe as you get older, that voice just amplifies. This is a 34-year-old telling you this, so I still have much more wisdom to learn. But
We all do, man.
yeah, yeah, I guess in terms of spirituality, I, I, yeah, hmm, have I become more spiritual with age?
Mhm. Maybe not even the traditional sense, but in a way where you feel like a deeper connection with yourself. That's what I think about
Yeah,
spirituality
I
personally.
I guess if spirituality is a different form of gratitude, or gratitude is a form of spirituality, I would say yes. I think, yeah, I guess generally speaking, I'm just recognizing as I get older um, that it's not all about me. It's
Yeah.
and and what you had mentioned this earlier. It's just recognizing people for who they are and what they bring to the table, and to know that we're all flawed, and we're all coming at it from our shadow. We're all coming at it from that 6 year old, and
Yeah.
we're all just constantly lugging around our baggage, and so
Yeah.
in that sense, yeah, it's I just have more empathy for people, and for myself as I get older, and so I guess that's the closest thing that I can define to spirituality.
Hmm.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. What about me?
Have you gotten more spiritual with age?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Oh, I can't. Unquestionably.
Yeah.
I think when I was young, I was just so consumed with, when I was young, like, pre college young, um, I was so consumed with skateboarding and video games and like these things that were creative, but I wouldn't say that well, actually, you know what? I kind of, I want to see if I have this actually. Do you mind waiting? Because I wrote something when I was like 15 years old and I found it. Do you mind
Yeah,
if I
please.
get it real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, give me a second. I think it's upstairs. Give me a second.
Okay.
Okay. I think I wrote this when I was like, so basically going back to the whole not being spiritual thing. I think there's moments of it. But let me read this really quick.
Mhm.
So I think I wrote this when I was like 13. So you have to put that into context. All right. The little things that no one knows beholds a beauty of a mystery, like wine flowing from the grail, the sound that fascinates the beating of my heart, with eyes of divinity, entrapping my very soul. And an aura of your presence leaves my mind in tranquility, a personality so deep it will move mountains at your very will, like fire to extinguish the flames and water to ignite the fire. The depth of your soul has endless possibilities.
Oh, that was when you were 15.
I think I was 13 or 14.
Oh my God.
And so I found this book, this basically of like a bunch of writing.
Uh-huh.
And you know, it's funny like you I think sometimes we forget that like we're essentially the same person, but when we were younger, but in just like with more knowledge or more understanding, or potentially more jadedness, coming from like disappointments, or maybe more optimism coming from those disappointments too, like more perspective, right? But
I just like I had a visual of you just in the corner in your high school cafeteria, just studiously just over your notebook, just writing all this down, or just at the same park, just under a tree. I'll be there in a second. Just let me just finish this up, guys.
yeah, exactly. Wait. I'll play Pokemon, but let me just write this really quick.
Oh man, you're such a sensitive soul, even at that age. It's
Oh,
beautiful.
dude, yeah, little flower child.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is.
Oh, thanks. No, thanks, man. But I guess like what I don't know. It just something reminded me of that. But
Mm,
I guess it's just kind of an argument for like. I mean, yes, the idea is evolve and growing and learning new things and all of that. But I think like there are certain parts of us that are still informed from when we were kids.
hmm
And there's also a pureness and a beauty to that, as
mm,
well. And I think it's a argument for letting go of certain things, like needing to progress, or this idea of what progression looks like externally,
mm,
and really just accepting yourself for who you are,
mm.
And this is me saying this because this is just things I've been thinking about, in general. But
Yeah, and to add on to that, just to fight against being jaded. I think that's something that's so common with age, and I definitely have to check myself at times as well, where I just think to myself, "Oh, this is it," and uh, just listening to those words of the 13-year-old Yoshino, there's just such optimism and hope, and yeah, it's like you need that to be able to carry yourself and to be able to persevere and endure through all the hardships in life, and yeah, I just hope that you don't lose that fight against being jaded, or at least being overconsumed by it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope that for all of us, like because when it comes, I mean, depending on what form of the arts you're in, some forms and also some countries uh, fund the arts in much better ways than the United States does. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think like I'm under the impression, perhaps this is, going back to spirituality, that like the arts find you,
Mm.
you know, like, and perhaps everything is like, or anything rather, that you should be doing will find you if you listen to it. And I
Mm.
think a lot of times people suppress those feelings.
Yeah.
There's this Jungian analyst. Her name is Marie Louise von Franz. And she said something to the effect that if you're a creative person and you don't utilize that creativity, it will turn into some sort of poison.
Interesting.
And that really stuck with me because, I think that our society does not allow for creative pursuits to be funded generally,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
and like how challenging that could be for someone to not get certain financial rewards for them to be incentivized to continue.
Mm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like, or even if you have those rewards, right? Like you have like a career in the arts and, you're making good money to doing it. It's like the paradox within that could be being afraid to step outside of that specific medium, or there's so many different psychological ways to think of it, I think, right? But I think at the end of the day, what is the most important thing? And I really think it's like these feelings that we feel about what we're doing. And it could be very simple, going back to how, the simplicity, right? Like, I mean, you could be super happy just having a very simple job and going on walks all day, Like,
Yeah.
have you ever seen that movie Patterson, by the
No,
way?
that's the one with Adam Driver, right?
Uh-huh. Adam Driver and Jim Jarmusch directed it.
Okay. No, I haven't seen it.
But it's kind of like that. Like, it's this guy, he drives a bus and he writes poetry and he just lives a super simple life.
Mm,
And um, it's very like he's like, lives a very monastic life.
mm,
And I think perhaps I'm romanticizing that a bit because I think I'm drawn to like the monastic ideologies, but
mm.
um, yeah, I don't know how I got down that road, but anyways,
The, the quote that you had mentioned earlier, it reminds me of another quote by the choreographer Martha Graham. I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but
Mm-mm.
I'm butchering this, but she had this incredibly insightful message for artists where pretty much essentially she's saying your job as an artist is not to critique your own work. It's not to criticize your own work. It's simply to put it out. And that's your only job. And kind of to that point of the previous person that you had mentioned, uh, it's because it just deserves to be out there. The world
Mm.
needs to have it. And so yeah, I think I think so much of that of just that direct line for creativity gets blocked, as you said, with suppression and just with our own insecurities, anxieties, and I think in terms of just having a simplified creative life, it's just to be able to get to that kind of Zen-like quality where you can, and it's so much easier said than done, but just to not
Yeah,
judge yourself and just to be able to create. And that's
yeah,
something that I, I've mentored younger artists in the past here and there, and
okay,
it's I, I don't get like too overly teacher or um, preachy with anybody, but I guess the one form of advice that I really put out to younger artists is that your self confidence is everything, and you have to hold it as such. You have to hold it with such preciousness, and it's a different world that a lot of these artists live in today. I mean, for us, I feel like we were kind of in that threshold generation of pre-social media and social media, and
hmm
a lot of what these younger artists are dealing with today is this is the complete norm of how they operate, and with criticisms. I mean, I like, as we're saying, we already grow up with having our own insecurities and our own voices that block us. But now you add to that fire with trolling and with other people just, criticizing you and trying to put you down. And I feel
yeah,
all of that is, it's, I don't know what the push and pull in terms of the progress of the arts. I don't know what's exactly happening. Time will tell, but um, I've spoken with young artists, and I've dealt it with myself as well, where you see artists really just shell up, and you see that that confidence that we all have, that purity that we all have of, we don't start any of these endeavors trying to be the greatest artist ever or trying to be successful. We do it because we simply just enjoy doing it and it makes us happy. And
hmm
so when at such an early age, when that feeling, that purity is robbed by other people saying something negative to you and about your work, that to me is really heartbreaking.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
affects everybody. I mean, every person has to deal with it and has dealt with it in a certain way. But yeah, I mean, I'm tree branching too now, but yeah, it's hard to really. It seems like it's harder in some ways just to find that monastic creative life. with
Yeah.
just all of the noise around us.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, there definitely is a lot of noise too. So I guess, going back to your show a bit, um, I'm curious, after all these pieces, I mean, you're in the middle of getting all these pieces out to the gallery and everything. So I'm assuming that all the pieces are painted. And I guess, like, what are some of your thoughts on your show and the meaning of it now that all the pieces are done?
Hmm. Well, the pieces are they're getting done.
Oh, okay. They're getting done. Okay.
I'm definitely working till the last minute.
Okay.
But yeah, I going back to earlier when we were just talking about this idea of liminality, and because of that, you get to a point where you feel like you don't have your own voice. You're losing your voice because of this constant balancing act. And for me, that manifested in itself for me to become just to suppress my emotions and to become passive and to just deal. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a complicated, because there's so many layers and there's so many different factors in my personal life that have led to this point. It's not even something that I feel like I can fully explain
Yeah, of course.
to anyone, let alone myself. And so, in a way, it's like I'm treating the show in the same fashion of how I'm dealing with it in my real life, which is I don't know how to address this. I'm struggling to articulate it. So I'm going to just put some paint on canvas, toy with whatever I'm feeling with, see if I can extrapolate any answers for myself. And as a cover to that, I'm titling it passive aggressively. I'm not giving away what I'm dealing with. I'm not telling you what you should see in the show. You guys could, whoever comes to my show can assess their own feelings and come to that point themselves. But yeah, I just wanted to mirror the show in the same way of what I'm dealing with now, which is I don't exactly know how to talk about this, and so here it is.
No, I get you. I get you. Yeah, I mean, it is hard sometimes to talk about works when it's incredibly personal, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just there's so many factors that lead to that point. There's cultural factors. There's factors of being from a broken family where you had to parentify at an early age, and so because you're doing that, you are suppressing your own wants and needs to take care of other people.
Yeah.
There's racism, dealing with racism, trying to adapt to a certain set of values that you grow up with inside the home. And as soon as you leave that door, you are faced with a completely an opposite, a conflicting culture with a completely different set of rules. And you're having to adjust to that. And so I guess, I guess in my work, that is always something that I'm fascinated with is just that gap between what you're dealing with and how it's perceived as an individual, and the schisms in life that lead to that. So I don't see it as I don't even see this show as like a completely new show that I'm doing. Although they're new works and it's my first show since I've done since the pandemic, it's just a 2.0 of whatever I did before, and I'm just adding to that discussion, and I'm adding to I'm just filling up the tabs in my life where I'm just adding to those things that I'm constantly trying to address for myself. And hopefully I can find some healing through it. And thus far I have. So I just got to continue painting and acting and just continue to learn about myself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, that's great. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. I think I feel like artworks, I mean, maybe this isn't for everyone, but artworks can be a continual conversation with yourself. You know, it's like I find it interesting when I read certain fiction novels and, you know, it's authors creating various characters in the novel, but there's certain things that I feel like people just can't get away from the more, you know, and it's almost like leaving a little breadcrumb and then for the viewer to pick out. But
do you appreciate that approach as the viewer?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I like understanding where their point of view is, you know, or finding some sort of catharsis for myself within it, or reading multiple books from an author and being like, oh, okay, like I can see, you know, how they strung these thoughts together and what that means about their personal perspective, you know, something interesting about that. But also with painting too, you know, and I think you can also, within artworks, I mean, you can look at any artwork really, and, you know, you can see people's insecurities in it. You can see, I mean, depending on like how much you care to look, right? You can see a lot, you know, a lot about it, and also potentially see something within yourself, right? So I think that art is such a rich subject just as a whole, because first of all, there's a lot of different mediums to connect with, but also, I mean, it's really just like a artifact of human experience, you know, a painting or a film or, you know, all of these things.
I heard from somebody, that art is the closest thing to touching God. I thought that was like a very fascinating thing.
I could see that.
And yeah, and that like you're when you're creating art or absorbing art, it's not a tangible substance that you can wrap your mind around or physically. And so it's just, when you're creating art, it's the one thing that you can really, it's the one thing that kind of goes beyond yourself that you can't fully even explain, which then I guess is the definition of God in many ways.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I'll have to look that one up. Well, cool. Yeah. Thanks for doing this, man. Is there any, well, you did give some advice for younger people, but is there any other advice or any other like last thoughts that you'd like to give the audience?
Just to keep creating. And nothing brilliant. I hope you can come to enjoy the show. It's on September 8th. It's a Thursday. We're having an opening night, and I missed engaging with people, man. To be honest, I've just been working on these. I've been filming these 2 projects since last year, and as soon as that wrapped, I was just in my studio alone, finishing these paintings. And I really just missed engaging with people. And so I'm so excited to be able to present my work and just to be able to talk and hang and celebrate together with folks. And so, I'm excited about that. And that's something that I feel like, when you're creating something and locking yourself away, you can definitely take advantage, you take for granted. And so,
yeah,
I'm very excited to for the show. So please come out and enjoy yourselves.
Nice. Cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, I will be there in spirit, my man.
I miss you, man.
I miss you too, dude. Yeah. Yeah, we'll definitely have to.
You were like one of my only outlets. I don't know if you remember, but like when the pandemic first happened and we were still in that kind of weird stage of whether things were shut down or not, like
Yeah,
we would just kind of find ourselves just having coffee here and there. And
totally.
uh, it just none of us knew what was happening. We didn't know what was going on, but it was just nice to have like another soul there just to be able to share that anxiety with. And I miss you very much.
No, I miss you too, man. Yeah. Oh, it's very nice. Yeah, it's nice of you to say, man. Yeah, I mean, well, I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all right, man. Well, yeah, thanks so much for doing this. And yeah, looking forward to seeing images of your show because I'm not going to be able to physically be out there, but everyone should go check it out. Is it in Manhattan? GR Gallery?
Lower East Side, yeah.
Lower East Side. Nice. Everyone go check it out. And yeah, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you, man.
Thanks, buddy. Always good hearing your voice.
All right, you too. Take care.
Bye.
Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. YouTube and creative support is by Tyler Scully. Social media assistance is by Noah Wainwright. Thanks so much for tuning in, and see you next time.